So we've learned that we do not need to beat ourselves up because maybe we just didn't understand. The apostles didn't understand. They didn't understand when Yeshua was telling them, hey, I'm going to be buried and raised after 3 days. And I think until it happened, they were, what? That's going to happen? So it's not that we're not being told, Joel. It's maybe that we're not paying attention. We're not seeing with spiritual eyes when God is telling us stuff. And maybe that's what a lot of the church is caught in. It tells us plainly, like you've just said, in the Word, these things must happen first. Yet we don't want to go there. Just like Peter didn't want to go there. No, Lord, no, you will not be crucified, not on my watch. No. So, we're told, so what do we do with things like Revelation 3:10, for example?
So, yeah, I've said a few times, there's not a single verse anywhere in the Bible that teaches a pre-tribulational rapture. And anytime I push our pre-trib brothers and sisters, show me any verse. The only verse that they'll ever point to is Revelation 3:10. And so essentially what it says, because you have kept my commandment to faithfully endure, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming upon the whole world. So people look at that and go, oh, look, it says he's going to keep us from the hour of trial that's coming upon the whole world. That's a pre-trib statement. And I go, really? So first of all, there's probably like 5 major problems with this argument. First of all, when you look at the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 2 and 3 are the 7 letters to the 7 churches that were in Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. Revelation 3:10 is part of the letter to the church of Philadelphia. I mean, it's a clear context, right? You always have to look at the context of any statement. What is the context of this statement? It was a letter to a first century, a very specific church in modern day Turkey. Okay, so even if you say, well, but it also has application to all of the church down through history, I go, fine, but its primary foundational meaning and intention is for the church of Philadelphia. Now, in the first century, there was a big persecution in that area. And he says, I will keep you from that. Was there anyone that was raptured in the first century from the church of Philadelphia? Of course not. There's only one resurrection, one rapture of the just. And so if there was no one raptured then, like, in other words, the only way that this would be a rapture passage is if you go, and there was like a few dozen people that were raptured out of the church. So you go, oh, okay, that must be what it's talking about. But no one was raptured. Second of all, and this is actually probably the first point, is that it's a conditional promise. If you keep my commandments, then you'll be raptured. So that's not teaching a pre-tribulational rapture. That, if it was teaching a rapture, it would be teaching a partial rapture. Only the hardcore, only the most faithful will be raptured. Everyone else gets left behind. Now, that is not what the pre-tribulational rapture guys teach. We get raptured based on if we have the Spirit of Christ in us, whether you believe it or not. Everyone gets raptured, everyone gets resurrected at the same time. There's no teaching in the Bible that says only, like as if, I've actually had people say to me, if you don't believe in the pre-trib rapture, you're going to get left behind. And I'm like, you're going to get left behind just for making such a dumb comment. Like that's not how it works. And your teachers don't even say that's how it works. The people that get raptured are those who are in Christ. Okay, so even if it was teaching a rapture, which it's not, it seems to be teaching a partial rapture of the elite. Okay, so obviously that's, even they would disagree with that. Second of all, if you say this is for us today, you have to be consistent. You can't just pick a verse and say, oh, this is going to keep us, and that's good. Therefore, I'm going to claim it as mine. But what about Revelation 2, verse 10? It says, I'm going to throw some of you on you're going to endure, you're going to be locked in prison, I think, for 10 days. You're going to suffer tribulation. Is that for everyone too? No, that's negative, so that's not for us. You can't do that. You can't pick and choose and say which verses you want to apply to you. And, like either you do it, they're all for you or they're not. Revelation 2:10 talks about suffering tribulation. They go, that's not for us. Revelation 3:10, we get raptured. Oh, that's for us. Okay? Completely inconsistent. It's like replacement theology, right? They go, oh, all of Israel's blessings, those are ours. All of Israel's curses, oh, that's for Israel.
Right.
You can't have a fundamentally inconsistent hermeneutic or method of interpretation.
Well, it's like saying I'll obey a speed limit, but stop signs, those are not for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to blow through those.
Those are for the other people. I actually agree with that. Just kidding. Just joking.
You mean it's not a yield? Oh, whoops.
In my state, yeah, exactly. I came to a rolling stop. Actually, what's funny is I shouldn't say this. My wife got a ticket for rolling through a red light, and she was like so mad. She's like, I know I stopped, and then they sent us the video. Rolled right through. So it's great when you actually have the videos. She's otherwise a great driver. Okay, so the
more compliments her.
yeah. She's the most beautiful, consistent driver I've ever met. So, okay, it's an inconsistent hermeneutic. It is not. It's if anything, it's teaching a partial rapture. I forget what else. But here's the thing. If someone says this is teaching a pre-trib rapture, they're fundamentally contradicting the words of Jesus in John 14 when he's praying really before he's betrayed and tortured and mutilated on the cross. And he said, Father, I don't pray that you would take them out of the world. Like, very specific. I do not pray that you would take them out of the world. Instead, I pray that you would keep them. He uses the exact same phrase, that you would keep them from the evil one. And then people go, yeah, but that was only for the disciples. That was not for everyone. You read like 3 verses later, and he says, and I pray this not only for these, but for everyone that will come to faith through them. It's for everyone. Yeah. Jesus specifically said, I am not asking that you would take them out of the world, but that you would keep them. The word keep in the Greek, tereo, it doesn't mean to remove, it means to preserve. Okay, so if you can a bunch of pickles and dilly beans and carrots, you can them, you preserve them, you keep them through the winter. You don't remove them from the winter. They still have to pass through the winter, but they are preserved, they are kept. That is the promise. The Lord promises to keep us through the hour of tribulation, not to remove us from. And so there's, like I said, I've just made 4 arguments. There's one other argument that I'm forgetting. The point is this: scratch a little bit below the surface, do a little bit more homework. It's not teaching a pre-tribulational rapture.
Exactly. And like we've talked about before, if this is truly the greater Exodus, we have to look at the lesser Exodus for an example. Well, what again happened in Goshen?
Exactly.
They were not pulled out of Egypt before the brimstone hit the fan.
Yep.
They were there and protected from it.
They were preserved.
Yep, preserved, exactly. And they did go through some of it, and they did suffer, but not to the extent of their unbelieving neighbors.
Exactly, yeah. The Goshen principle that Israel was in Goshen while the plagues were being poured out on Egypt. They were in Egypt, Goshen was in Egypt, and yet the plagues did not affect, they did not take the Israelites out. And that really becomes the primary pattern in the Old Testament for the tribulation. The Lord has promised. And that doesn't mean that our lives necessarily, we may lose our lives, but our spiritual lives, our faith will be preserved.
Yep, and that is the end, preserved to the end.
Yeah.
Some others might give the example that, well, again, this is sort of this replacement theology mixing in with all of this end time stuff. And so when it's called Jacob's trouble, some folks will say, oh, well, that's big bad Israel for their sins. That's not us.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an argument that's often made, again, by our pre-trib brothers and sisters. They'll say it's Jacob's trouble, therefore it's not for us. It's Jacob's trouble, it's not for us. Well, yes, in Jeremiah 31, it's called Jacob's trouble. Behold, it is the time of Jacob's trouble. You know, there's nothing like it. But later, Jesus refers to it as the Great Tribulation. He sort of expands it, he universalizes it a bit. Yes, its original context is Jacob's trouble, but the underlying presumption, the argument there is that therefore, that's the only purpose for the tribulation. But even our pre-trib brothers and sisters will admit, they'll go, but the other purpose of the tribulation is to punish unbelievers. You go, well, no, it's Jacob's trouble. You just said that's the reason that we're out of here, because it's not for us. And if it's Jacob's trouble, then it's not for unbelievers, so they're going to get raptured too. They go, no, they're going to get punished. You go, okay, so there's multiple purposes. God has multiple reasons for the tribulation. They go, well, yeah. You go, so you just eliminated your own argument. The purpose of the tribulation is to chastise, lovingly chastise unto their salvation, Israel, is to break them of their own will so that they'll repent and turn to him. It's to punish the wicked, the unbelievers, vengeance against the wicked, and it's also for the refining and the purification of the church, and so that we corporately can glorify God. If necessary, laying down our lives. You know, this is the type of language used throughout the book of Revelation. They did not love their lives unto death, and therefore they are called faithful witnesses. And we should see that not as something to be avoided. And I know this, again, this strikes at the flesh. It's not something to be avoided, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us corporately to glorify God and to stand with Israel in their time of trouble. How can we say, oh, the God of Israel, well, he's ours. The Messiah of Israel, he's ours. The new covenant of Israel, oh, that's ours. The King of Israel, he's ours. The kingdom of Israel, that belongs to us. The blessings, the inheritances of Israel, that's ours. Israel's trouble, oh, that's theirs. It's not how it works. It's a package deal. So this is, as you said, kind of like replacement theology. You can't pick and choose.
Right, exactly. If it's Jacob's trouble, who is Jacob? Jacob is Israel. We are of the commonwealth of Israel. So what Israel goes through, we're going to go through. So yeah, exactly. You can't pick and choose and be part of the family, but avoid the punishment. So now that we have that settled, what do we do with this other argument that we are not appointed to wrath, which is often brought up when this sort of like, that's not us type of situation?
Yeah, it says specifically, I mean, it's because of what Yeshua did for us. We are not appointed to wrath, rather we will inherit salvation. We're destined for salvation.
It sounds like a pre-trib thing, sure, granted. So
what it's talking about, well, okay, so all the verse is saying is that we are not destined, we are not appointed to eternal wrath. The wicked will suffer wrath for eternity. We're not appointed to that. Rather, we're appointed to salvation. That's all it's saying. Now, what they'll say, our pre-trib brothers and sisters, they'll say, well, all 7 years is the wrath of God. All 7 years before the return of Jesus is the wrath of God. And since we're not appointed to wrath, we will be raptured out of here. Again, the verse is not saying that. When you actually examine the book of Revelation, the wrath of God is technically really not poured out until, some would say, the trumpets. I would argue it's the bowls. That's why they're called the bowls of wrath. And we need to recognize there's a profound difference between persecution and, in the Greek, thlipsis, okay, tribulation, trial, testing, persecution, and the Greek is orge, or orge, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Again, the wrath of God. Technically, the wrath of God is not poured out until the bowls of wrath. Now, I believe that the rapture, the resurrection, happens at the blasting of the seventh trumpet, the last trumpet, as Paul says. So then after that are the bowls of wrath. So I believe, as Paul said, that when he returns, when he is revealed, we will be revealed with him. So again, he comes from heaven, we are caught up, we meet him in the clouds, and we usher and come back with him. And I believe the bowls of wrath are poured out on the wicked, on unbelievers, by Yeshua himself personally. That he is actually on the earth executing the vengeance of God. You look at numerous passages, Deuteronomy 33, Habakkuk 3, it says lightning or fire is shooting out of his hands. It says rays flash forward from his hands where his power is hidden. Plague goes before him. Pestilence follows in his steps. He's portrayed as marching and executing, again, pouring out the plagues, pestilences personally on the ground. We will be with him, we'll be on the ground, but we will be impervious. We will be in our glorified, immortal, resurrected bodies. So we will not be suffering. We are exempt from the wrath of God that the wicked will receive. We're exempt from those things. You have numerous passages throughout the Bible that actually, and this makes a lot of people very uncomfortable, where it says that we will participate with Jesus. First, it says he'll come back and crush his enemies like grapes. You have passages like Isaiah 63. He's soaked in the blood of his enemies. It says their lifeblood spattered my garments. How does he get blood all over himself if he's not on the earth? But then here's the parts that make people really uncomfortable. It says that we will actually participate with him in that. It says, you will wash your feet in the blood of your enemies. Psalm 68, you go, whoa. You've got passages like, I love this one in Malachi 4. It says, but for you, for Christians, it says, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his wings, and you will skip about like a baby goat out of its stall, jumping and skipping, like celebrating. And then it said, so that's wonderful. You go, oh, yeah, I can't wait till the Son of Righteousness returns with healing in its wings, and we'll all jump around like a bunch of excited little baby goats. And then it says, you will trample your enemies under your feet like ashes. You go, whoa. So the point is, we could point to numerous passages. The Bible describes us, not only Jesus as slaughtering his enemies, it actually describes us as participating with him in the defeat of his enemies. And people go, that's a little violent. It's a little harsh. I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. Is that in the New Testament? I go, well, it says in the book of Revelation, in righteousness, he judges and makes war. It describes him as being soaked again in the blood of his enemies. He tells the parable. In every parable where there's a king, Jesus is the king. Jesus tells the parable, and he says at the end of the parable, then the king will say, bring all of these unrighteous, unworthy servants that didn't want me to rule over them and slaughter them in my presence. That was a story Jesus told. Yeshua told that story. So the point is this, I believe we are exempt from the wrath of God. I believe the wrath of God is poured out at the very end of the tribulation after he returns. I believe we will be with him in our glorified immortal bodies, and then the bowls of wrath culminate where? Armageddon. Armageddon. So it's an increasing in intensity series of judgment events, but I believe that he actually personally executes those. So I agree with that, brothers. We're exempt from wrath. I just disagree. They say the whole tribulation's wrath, and I go, you can't provide any scripture that says that.
Right, and again, that doesn't jive with Exodus, where here's something interesting to point out. So I was reading through Exodus last weekend, and just as, like you said, Yeshua is pouring out the wrath at the end. Everything before could be man, could be God, could be a combination of things, nuclear war, whatever, right? But these other things are clearly, no man can do this. This is God doing this, right? Same thing in Exodus, where, if you remember, the first couple of plagues, the magicians were able to copy it.
Yep.
But past the first 2 or 3, they couldn't do anything. This was only Yehovah, and the magicians told Pharaoh that.
Yeah.
So it kind of matches, it's the same type of story. Again, the lesser Exodus and the greater Exodus.
Yeah. It's a much more graphic story than most people are willing to admit if they only read they only Psalm 23, well, he's just the gentle shepherd, a little lamb on his shoulder, leads me by still waters, and he's the peaceful, again, the hippie Jesus that they often imagine. But they ignore a lot of the more graphic. Look, there's a day of justice coming. There's people throughout the earth, human trafficking. There's going to be hell to pay. And I think if our hearts are in alignment with his heart, we should look forward to that day as well.
Absolutely. Yep. And have the heart of Yeshua to stand up to the Pharisees of this world and tell them they're wrong. So, Joel, thank you so much for joining us for this series. It's been very enlightening. And so you've mentioned that you've mentioned this in your books, and one particular book. So where can folks get that?
So I talk about the return of Jesus in my book, Sinai to Zion. You can get it on Amazon. I'd say go to Amazon. I actually stopped printing them, so I just did the Amazon Lightning thing. And also, let me just say this. All my books are free as PDF files on my website, joelstrumpet.com. Multiple languages translated. I put everything I have out there for free.
Oh, wow. Appreciate that. Thank you. Very important to get that out there and share it with friends. Download the PDF, share it with someone who needs to see it.
Yep.
Not just one verse here and there, but the whole context.
Yep.
All right. Joel, thanks again. Appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. You brought Joel here. We really appreciate that. I appreciate it. And hopefully you can provide this series to other folks who need to see it, get some context behind what we believe and why we believe it, and maybe get some folks to think who are maybe thinking the other side of things with a pre-tribulation rapture. I hope by the end of the series you can see it just doesn't make sense, and maybe other folks can see that as well. So again, thank you for sharing this. Thank you for watching Shabbat Night Live. We'll see you next week. Until then, Shabbat Shalom.